Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump signing orders on TikTok and the death penalty in the nation's capital. And a presidential memo on domestic terrorism, Mario Tsu standing by at the White House. Authorities released new evidence in the deadly shooting at a Dallas ICE facility, saying they are now confident they know who and what the shooter was targeting. Jason Blair brings us the latest. The Trump administration is bracing for a government shutdown and has advised federal agencies to prepare reduction in force plans for possible layoffs. Will Democrats stay the course and force a shutdown? Luis Eduardo Martinez on Capitol Hill. President Trump meeting with Turkish President Erdogan at the White House. Trump urges Erdogan to stop buying Russian oil and says he could drop certain sanctions on Turkey. Jack Bradley reports. The Justice Department sues 6 states for failing to turn over their voter registration rolls. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon says the DOJ is trying to ensure that states comply with federal law and protect Americans from voter fraud and abuse. Arlene Richards with more on the lawsuit.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump signing executive orders to keep TikTok alive in the U.S. and to crack down on political violence. Joining us now live is NTD's Washington correspondent, Mario Tsu. Good evening, Mari. What can you tell us about the executive actions the president's signing today?
Tiff, good evening. Yes, just a little while ago, President Trump signed an executive order that approves a deal to keep TikTok alive in the U.S. Now, in his first term, the president called for the app to be banned, but he's since changed course, delaying that ban 4 times now until December. And while this executive order confirms that the TikTok deal complies with America's national security standards, some lawmakers have been expressing concerns about the deal over the app's ties to the CCP. Points of concern have been twofold. One, the CCP continuing to control TikTok through its algorithm, and the CCP's access to American user data posing a large national security threat. But President Trump insists that the app will be owned by majority American investors and that those investors will be controlling the algorithm. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance on this issue. Watch.
Deal really does mean that Americans can use TikTok, but actually use it with more confidence than they had in the past, because their data is going to be secure and it's not going to be used as a propaganda weapon against our fellow citizens.
The White House is touting this as a historic deal, saying businesses using TikTok will generate as much as $178 billion in the U.S. in the next 4 years. The deal entails the American tech company Oracle serving as a security provider and storing American data. The president says Larry Ellison of Oracle is involved as one of the investors, as well as Michael Dell and Rupert Murdoch. Meanwhile, President Trump also signs an executive order to allow for the death penalty in Washington, D.C. Take a look.
This is the death penalty for somebody that kills people in Washington, D.C. I think it's capital. It's a very interesting capital punishment, capital city, right? It's capital. But this is our capital city. We can't allow that to happen. People come in from Iowa to look at the Lincoln Memorial and they end up getting killed. It doesn't happen anymore. It's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it's the death penalty for the person that did it.
President Trump recently floated this idea in his cabinet meeting, his historically long cabinet meeting back in August. And while signing the executive order today, the president is mentioning both Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska's stabbing, the murder in North Carolina last month, and touting the results of the D.C. crime crackdown. And Attorney General Pam Bondi is saying that her administration is seeking the death penalty not just in the Capitol, but all across the country. Tiff?
And Mari, what about the presidential memo?
Sure, Tiff. So President Trump also just signed a memo called Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. The White House says the memo will activate a government-wide, wide-ranging response from the Joint Terrorism Task Force to the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of the Treasury. The administration says that they'll be looking at sources of organization and funding that support and prop up these groups. Here's the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller.
what we have seen, if you look at whether it be going back to the riots that started with Black Lives Matter and all the way through to the Antifa riots, the attacks on ICE officers, the doxing campaigns, and now the political assassinations, these are not lone, isolated events. This is part of an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. It is structured, it is sophisticated, it is well funded, it is well planned. There is really no parallel like this to anything else in the country right now.
And this is coming just a day after President Trump responded to the Dallas ICE facility shooting yesterday, drawing attention to the anti-ICE messaging on the shell casings from the shooting. And that shooting is coming less than 2 days after President Trump signed yet another executive order on Monday night designating Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. Tiff, back to you.
Mari, thanks for those updates. President Trump met with Turkish President Erdogan at the White House today. Their talk centered around lifting sanctions, purchasing American military aircraft, but ultimately ending the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
President Trump meeting with Turkish President Erdogan on Thursday. This is Erdogan's first visit to the White House in about 6 years. That's because during his first term, President Trump imposed sanctions on Turkey in 2020 for purchasing missile systems from Russia. U.S. officials said at the time that Turkey's use of Russia's equipment could be used to gather data on the capabilities of American F-35 fighter jets, and that information could end up in Russian hands. Trump then stopped Turkey from buying the F-35. Trump suggested that the U.S. could lift those sanctions and potentially allow Turkey to buy not only the F-35, but the F-16 and Patriot missile systems. But in return, Turkey has to stop buying oil and gas from Russia.
I believe he will stop it, yeah. You know why? Because he can buy from a lot of other people.
Turkey isn't the only NATO member purchasing Russian oil. France, Spain, Hungary, Slovakia, and Belgium are Europe's top importers of Russian energy.
They're funding the war against themselves. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia.
The U.S. and Turkey both back new leadership in Syria, but they're at odds over the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. He even spoke up for Hamas.
I don't see Hamas as a terrorist organization. On the contrary, I see it as a resistance group.
President Trump recently met with several Arab leaders on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. That's where he presented a 21-step peace plan for Gaza. And Trump says a deal is near.
We spoke with Bibi Netanyahu today, and we spoke to all the leaders in the Middle East, who are great people, and we're getting pretty close to having a deal on Gaza. But I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank.
Erdogan said alongside Trump in the Oval Office that this is a different period in U.S.-Turkey relations. What remains to be seen is if Erdogan can help Trump in bringing these conflicts to an end. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
President Trump, in his meeting with the Turkish president, also talked about possible charges for former FBI Director James Comey.
Well, I can't tell you what's going to happen because I don't know. You have very professional people headed up by the Attorney General and Todd Blanche and Lindsay Halligan, who's very smart, good lawyer, very good lawyer. They're going to make a determination. I'm not making that determination. I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. He did terrible things at the FBI, and but I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen.
And what factors could Attorney General Pam Bondi be considering right now, weighing whether or not to bring charges against Comey? Hear from legal analyst Keith Gross tonight on Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Authorities say handwritten notes reveal that ICE personnel and property were the target of Wednesday's shooting at a Dallas ICE facility, and that the suspected shooter wasn't expected to survive. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the latest.
To include Jan's own words in his handwritten notes. Jan specifically intended to kill ICE agents.
New information about suspected Dallas ICE facility shooter Joshua Yan has been released. After searching his residence, authorities say that they found a collection of handwritten notes.
He wrote that he intended to maximize lethality against ICE personnel and to maximize property damage at the facility.
Larson says that the notes indicate that Yan didn't intend to kill any detainees.
He hoped to minimize any collateral damage or injury to the detainees and any other innocent people.
Authorities also praised law enforcement for putting themselves at risk to try to protect the detainees while shots were being fired.
When Jan began firing, agents from both ICE and the ATF put themselves in the line of fire to move individuals off the transportation vehicles in an attempt to protect and rescue those that were injured.
FBI Director Kash Patel reports that Jan did multiple searches of ballistics and the, quote, Charlie Kirk shot video. He also searched for apps that track ICE. He downloaded a document containing a list of DHS facilities, and FBI found a written note that says, quote, hopefully this will give ICE agents real terror to think, is there a sniper with AP rounds on that roof? Authorities say that they found bullet holes all throughout the building.
It wasn't just targeted at one specific area or through a window, that he showered the building with bullets and was very much focused on hitting anyone that he could inside and making sure that they were victims of his attack.
Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson calls the shooting troubling.
It's very troubling, I think, the trend that we're seeing of increasing political violence in this country. And yesterday's political violence hit close to home for us here in Dallas.
House Leader Hakeem Jeffries pushes to bring down the temperature.
Political violence directed against anyone at any time for any reason in the United States of America, and ideologically driven violence is unacceptable. The climate of violence that exists right now in the United States of America is out of control, and we need leadership coming from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to take the temperature down for everybody.
The shooting happened close to 6:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning. One detainee is deceased. 2 others are in critical condition. No law enforcement were harmed, and the shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Authorities say that evidence shows that the suspected shooter likely acted alone, and that handwritten notes indicate that he did not expect to survive the event. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The White House's Office of Management and Budget has asked federal agencies to prepare for a reduction in force of non-statutory programs as Senate Democrats maintain their position of forcing a government shutdown. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
The President of the United States is saying, I'm going to take away your health care, and if you stand up for that, well, then I'll turn around and lay off people, fire workers.
Senate Democrats who refused to extend government funding past September 30th are now blaming President Trump for taking preemptive action on an imminent government shutdown by preparing a reduction in force of non-essential federal government personnel. The Office of Management and Budget's letter to federal agencies seeks to rein in spending in preparation for a lapse in funding that may start on October 1st if Senate Democrats refuse to fund the government.
Well, let's be clear about where we are. House Republicans passed a continuing resolution last week to keep the government funded and open. There is not one legitimate reason that Democrats should not support a continuing resolution. They have voted for it every time when Joe Biden and Barack Obama were president.
The messaging from Democratic leadership has been to portray the expiration of COVID-era healthcare tax credits as a Republican choice to cut healthcare, despite the fact that it was Democrats who set the expiration of those premiums back in 2021 through their Inflation Reduction Act reconciliation bill.
Republicans have made their intentions clear as it relates to health care of the American people. They want to destroy it. Republicans have spent the entire year destroying the health care of the American people. Our position is clear. Cancel the cuts, lower the cost, save health care.
Republican leadership remains open to discuss some form of extension of these health care credits. Senate Democrats will have another chance at avoiding a government shutdown next week when the Senate will likely vote again on the House-passed continuing resolution.
A lot of these folks get auto-enrolled. The payments are made directly to the insurance companies. Like I said, this is a program that needs reform, but I think everybody is willing to sit down and talk about how to make that happen in a context where it should be discussed, not as a hostage to keep the government open. I mean,
it's important to note that despite being in the majority in both chambers, Republicans have conceded to maintaining current levels of government spending instead of reducing them. President Trump supports congressional Republicans' efforts to maintain the government open and avoid unnecessary reductions in force of the federal government. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The Justice Department announced today that it's suing 6 states, including California and New York, for failure to provide their voter registration rolls. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said in a statement on Thursday that states are required to safeguard American elections. Dillon's statement comes as part of an announcement that the Department of Justice has sued 6 U.S. states for failure to comply with federal election laws. The department said in an official statement that federal lawsuits were filed in each of the states for allegedly not responding to a request to turn over voter registration lists. The states involved are California, New York, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. Attorney General Pam Bondi said every state has a responsibility to ensure that voter registration records are accurate, accessible, and secure. According to the announcement, the Civil Rights Act allows the Attorney General to request and inspect voter records, and the Voter Rights Act permits the AG to ensure that states have proper and effective voter registration programs. Dillon said the department is attempting to ensure that states' elections comply with the law to protect Americans from voter fraud and abuse. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, the North American Aerospace Defense Command reports intercepting 4 Russian military planes off Alaska. Arian Pozdar has how Washington is responding. The British Royal Navy is shadowing Russian ships traversing through British waters, while Germany is calling for deterrence by NATO against Russian incursions. Malcolm Hudson reports from the UK. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrives in New York to speak at the United Nations and meet with President Trump. Meanwhile, Israeli forces launched their most powerful strikes yet in Yemen. Jason Perry with the details. And a French court has sentenced former President Nicolas Sarkozy to prison. The verdict tied to claims of Libyan money in his campaign. David Vives reports from Paris when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump defends his latest comments in which he changed his stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. That says NORAD reports intercepting 4 Russian military planes off Alaska. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has more.
I said yesterday, let it keep going because their economy is absolutely terrible right now. And I think it's a shame that they're doing that, killing a lot of people unnecessarily.
President Trump on Thursday explaining his change in stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. On Tuesday, Trump said that Ukraine can win back its territory captured by Russia since the beginning of the fighting. That's with the support of the European Union and NATO. But Trump continues calling on Russia to stop the fighting.
It's such a waste of human life, and so he ought to stop. Putin ought to stop.
And the North American Aerospace Defense Command reported scrambling 9 aircraft Wednesday after Russian jets neared Alaska. The Russian planes reportedly remained in international airspace and did not enter U.S. or Canadian airspace. But they did enter the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. That's an area of international airspace that requires the ready identification of all aircraft for national security purposes. And Denmark reports airspace violations by unidentified drones. It hasn't been confirmed where the drones originated, but both the Danish Prime Minister and NATO Secretary General say that Russia can't be ruled out.
I take this very seriously. It is clear that this is a development that cannot continue. This must be stopped.
The European Union Commission is now stressing the importance of investing in a drone wall to protect the bloc.
These latest drone incursions highlight, once again, I have the impression now that I'm saying this every day on the podium, but highlight once again the work that is currently ongoing to build such a drone wall.
NATO is warning Russia that it would use all means to defend against any further breaches of its airspace. Arian Pozdar, NTD News.
Britain's Navy shadows Russian ships traversing through British seas with a keen eye on protecting critical infrastructure. Germany called for effective deterrence by NATO against Russian incursions and highlighted the threat of space warfare. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
The British Royal Navy said UK crews have shadowed a Russian warship and a freighter through UK seas. It comes amid warnings that Moscow is sending a rising number of vessels through British waters. UK Defence Minister Luke Pollard said the Royal Navy monitors Russian movements 24/7, ensuring the security of Britain's territorial waters and vital undersea cables. He said this is a clear demonstration that the UK stands firm with NATO allies in deterring Russian aggression. The operation took place amid tensions between Moscow and NATO countries after a series of suspected Russian incursions into NATO airspace. Poland downed drones that violated its airspace on September 10th as Russia launched a wave of aerial attacks on Ukraine. Russian pilots later staged a 12-minute incursion into Estonian airspace. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz called for effective deterrence by NATO in response to repeated airspace violations by Russia.
Now, we will not allow these incursions to continue, and we will take all necessary measures to effectively deter these airspace violations, these incursions by the Russian army.
NATO warned Russia on Tuesday that it would use all necessary military and non-military tools to defend itself. Merz said he found NATO's position on the matter absolutely right. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said Russia is currently tracking 2 Intelsat satellites used by the German military. He said Russia and China have the capability to engage in space warfare and already occupy strategic positions in space, adding that they can jam, blind, manipulate or kinetically disrupt satellites. Europe lags behind the United States, China and Russia in space. For decades, Europe has relied upon the US for its security in space, but the Trump administration's America First policies, plus a commercial market that is growing exponentially, have prompted Europeans to rethink their approach. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in New York today ahead of his upcoming speech at the United Nations. He's also set to meet with President Trump. This comes as Israeli forces launched what they call their most powerful strikes in Yemen. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Protesters gathered outside the airport in Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was expected to depart for the United States. Netanyahu is set to speak at the United Nations on Friday and also meet with President Trump. One of the protesters had this message for Trump.
Please bring our brothers and sisters home because it's too much time. It's almost 2 years. We cannot celebrate our holidays because we're waiting till the last hostage is back home.
And Netanyahu said this before his departure.
I am now leaving with my wife for the UN General Assembly in Washington. I will condemn those leaders who, instead of denouncing the murderers, rapists, and child burners, want to give them a state in the heart of the land of Israel. This will not happen.
And while on the plane to New York, Netanyahu ordered airstrikes in Yemen on targets belonging to the Houthi terrorist group. Israel reported striking the Houthi General Staff Command Headquarters, Security and Intelligence Compounds, the Military Public Relations Headquarters, and military camps where weapons and operatives were identified. Netanyahu arrived in New York on Thursday, where he was greeted by Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon. Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force has reportedly been striking about 200 terrorist targets in the Gaza Strip every day. And the spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces said that about 700,000 residents have now evacuated Gaza City, one of Hamas's final strongholds. However, some residents are refusing to leave the combat zones. A local resident was doing an interview as gunshots were heard in the background. And then, a little while later, the interview was interrupted by another sound in the war zone. In another development, about 50 civilian boats carrying activists in support of Palestine are attempting to sail to the Gaza Strip. The group, which includes Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, hopes to break Israel's naval blockade and deliver aid to residents in the Gaza Strip. But Israel's foreign ministry accused the flotilla of being connected to Hamas. Israel posted photos on X in which the spokesman and the coordinator of the Global Samud Flotilla appear alongside the head of Hamas's North African operations. Israel also said the man who owns the ships in the flotilla is a Hamas operative, saying, quote, "The link to Hamas isn't hidden, it's in plain sight." Jason Perry, NTD News.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been convicted of receiving Libyan campaign funds in 2007 and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He denies wrongdoing, calling the ruling a persecution. NTD international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
A French court specialized in financial crimes has convicted former French President Nicolas Sarkozy for receiving illegal campaign funds from Libya in 2007. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with part of that sentence to be served immediately despite his appeal. This marks the first time a French president has been convicted. The court called his action a criminal conspiracy of an exceptional gravity, likely to undermine citizens' confidence in those who represent them. Sarkozy has denied the charges, calling the ruling a persecution.
I couldn't be accused of any personal enrichment. No illegal financing of my campaign. No personal enrichment.
The court found him guilty of criminal association in a 2005-2007 plot to obtain Libyan funds in exchange for diplomatic favors, but cleared him of other charges like illegal campaign financing and corruption. This trial followed more than 10 years of investigation and press revelations exposing a suspected corrupt pact between Gaddafi's Libya and Sarkozy's political circle.
I will comply with the summons of justice. If they absolutely want me to sleep in prison, I will sleep in prison, but with my head held high. I am innocent.
Despite the conviction, Sarkozy remains influential in French politics, meeting current leaders and leading support to right-wing National Rally Party. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, the chairman of the Select Committee on the CCP applauds 7 U.S. universities for cutting joint ventures with a Chinese Communist Party-backed council. Plus, new legislation aims to release U.S. citizens and family members wrongfully detained by the Chinese regime. Moolenaar reports. And in Canada, many are reeling after learning about the Chinese regime's crimes against humanity. The award-winning documentary State Organs chilling audiences who are now calling for action. Stay tuned for that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. 7 more U.S. universities have cut ties with the Chinese Communist Party following calls from the House Select Committee on the CCP. And a bipartisan group of lawmakers is pushing legislation to release wrongfully detained U.S. citizens and their family members from Chinese jails. NTD's Moolenaar reports.
7 U.S. universities have closed their joint ventures with the China Scholarship Council, a Chinese Communist Party-backed scholarship program. University of Notre Dame and Dartmouth College are among those who have cut ties. It comes after the House Committee on the Chinese Communist Party raised concerns that the partnership allowed the CCP to exploit U.S. institutions to transfer sensitive tech that's used to support China's military growth. Chairman of the Select Committee on the CCP commended the decisions, writing that the institutions are demonstrating real leadership and a commitment to safeguarding U.S. research and innovation. He hopes others will follow suit. In other news, a Republican and a Democrat are pushing a bill to release Americans wrongfully detained in China. Congressman Chris Smith says the CCP holds more Americans as prisoners than any other nation in the world. The congressman said it is well past time that the United States responds forcefully and fearlessly to rescue its citizens who have been held hostage by the CCP. His bill would direct the Secretary of State to create a plan to identify all cases of concern and use leverage available to release citizens in Chinese custody. It also aims to counter the CCP's tactic of suppressing free speech abroad by holding family members of American citizens as hostages. One example is the sister of Uyghur American activist Rushan Abbas. After she spoke out against the CCP's human rights abuses in Xinjiang, her sister was handed a 20-year prison sentence on terrorism-related charges. Smith said these deliberate assaults on the freedoms and livelihoods of American citizens and their families must end once and for all. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Moolenaar, NTD News.
The chairman of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party is demanding the city of Philadelphia cancel an upcoming flag-raising ceremony. The city is planning to raise the CCP's 5-star red flag. Chairman John Moolenaar sent a letter to Philadelphia Mayor Sherrell Parker this week and said they should not raise the flag of an authoritarian regime, especially in the city where America declared independence. In 2018, the city of Philadelphia launched a flag-raising program that honors residents with international heritage with a goal to be more welcoming to immigrants. In a post on X today, Moolenaar said raising the flag of the People's Republic of China over Philadelphia is a disgrace to our nation's founding values and flies in the face of all the courageous dissidents and human rights advocates who tirelessly work to bring freedom to the Chinese people. No response yet from Mayor Parker on Moolenaar's request. And the award-winning documentary State Organs has received international recognition for exposing the Chinese regime's forced organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience. With over 40 accolades to date, the film continues to be screened globally. A recent showing at a community center in Canada left many viewers deeply moved. Let's take a look.
Through more than 30 executive interviews, the film reveals how Falun Gong practitioners who follow meditative exercises and teachings based on truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance were once widely known for their improved health, but later became the focus of a decades-long persecution.
The stories that were told by the families who were missing family members, they're not like any kind of story I ever could have imagined, and the dedication and love that they showed for their missing family members. And that contrasted with the horror and the bleakness of the situation with the harvesting a body part.
It's a really strong message about what can happen when tyranny grows so strong in the mind that people lose a sense of rationality, of humaneness and humanity, and you see the results of it in the film.
They don't care about the other person. They care about profit. They care about keeping the system. As long as the Communist Party has control over the populace, these kinds of criminal acts will continue, for profit.
In 1999, the Chinese Communist Party launched a nationwide campaign to eradicate Falun Gong. Since then, adherents have been detained in prisons, labor camps, and so-called re-education camps. The film documents the extraordinary strength and resilience, remaining steadfast in their faith despite years of torture.
They believe their convictions to their faith so much.
I'm impressed with how they were tortured and they don't give up their beliefs. That says a lot about their faith and about their commitment, about their values.
During a post-screening discussion, the film producer Cindy Song revealed that the crimes of forced organ harvesting are still happening today.
In Canada, some patients, they're waiting for organs for years. When the Chinese hospital, they advertise, they can give you a matching organ very quick, like 1 week or 2 weeks. Those operations, they were driven by the money. So that's poor medical standard. So some patients died on the operation bed. There's no proper check about the donor. There's more risky that could get further infections.
Deeply moved by the documentary, many viewers said they felt compelled to speak out and take action to bring an end to the atrocities.
I'm going to put it all over social media. Everybody needs to know this story, and everybody needs to take it into themselves and think deeply about it and what on earth they could do to change the way things are unfolding on this planet.
We want to stand up for all of them. These are serious days in our world, and every life matters.
NTD News, Canada.
Coming up, new details are released from LA County's after-action report on the January Eaton and Palisades wildfires. Christina Corona has the key takeaways from the review, including delays in evacuation alerts and gaps in emergency communications. And Amazon is ordered to pay $2.5 billion in a lawsuit filed by the Federal Trade Commission. Most of the fine will go toward reimbursing Prime subscribers who the FTC says were duped into renewing their memberships. David Lamb tells us more about the settlement when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors released a long-awaited after-action report on the January Eaton and Palisades fires. It highlights evacuation procedures and notes that emergency alerts may not have been effectively communicated to residents. NTD's Christina Corona reports.
The LA County Board of Supervisors released the long-awaited after-action report Thursday on the devastating January wildfires. The review highlights delays in evacuation alerts and gaps in emergency communication. LA County officials discussed the report on Thursday. Sean Tyree, the president of McChrystal Group's government sector, shared how their data was collected.
Our team examined notification and communication metadata, conducted qualitative interviews, and hosted community engagements to understand the human psychology and perspective that shaped the decision-making of both first responders and community members who were under duress and acting with incomplete information.
He says their team analyzed over 150,000 records of alert and evacuation data. The review found no single point of failure in how alerts, warnings, and evacuations were handled.
Our findings, however, did not indicate that the incident command hesitated or delayed in sending alerts and notifications based on the information they had at the time. The review identified specific systemic issues that played an outsized role in exacerbating the conditions and can be prevented and improved in the future.
Instead, it cited multiple weaknesses, including outdated policies, inconsistent procedures, and communication gaps that limited the effectiveness of the county's response. The 132-page report examined evacuation delays during the Eaton fire, where many residents west of Altadena did not receive alerts until hours after the flames were reported in the area. The report says that while officials initially ordered evacuations east of Lake Avenue at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, January 7th, West Altadena did not get its first evacuation order until 3:25 a.m. on Wednesday, January 8th, even though at least a dozen 911 calls reported fire earlier in the night. Tyree also noted that firefighters were short-staffed, often forced to cover multiple fronts at once. Officials said the shortage strained response times and complicated evacuation efforts. Investigators also said high winds up to 90 miles per hour, coordination issues among the LA County Fire Department, Sheriff's Department, and the Office of Emergency Management, as well as gaps in documentation, were factors in evacuation delays. The report highlighted the need for clearer policies, stronger training, and improved public communication. Reporting from the city of Altadena, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Many Amazon Prime members are expected to get refunds. That's as Amazon agrees to settle a lawsuit that claims the company used tactics of manipulation. NTD's David Lamb has more.
Amazon has agreed to pay $2.5 billion to settle a lawsuit over its Prime subscription service. On top of fines, the settlement includes $1.5 billion to reimburse subscribers. The company will also have to clarify its subscription terms and cancellation options. Eligible Prime members can receive $51 in compensation. Filed in 2023, the Federal Trade Commission accused Amazon of using manipulative tactics to enroll millions of users into its Prime service, at the same time making it hard for people to unsubscribe. Amazon has denied any wrongdoing. It said in a statement, "Amazon and our executives have always followed the law, and this settlement allows us to move forward and focus on innovating for customers." Millions who paid for Amazon Prime between 2019 and 2025 could automatically be refunded up to $51. Others will be able to submit claims for refunds. Eligibility depends on how many Prime perks were used, aside from free shipping. David Lamb, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.